Is America really a democracy, or has it quietly shifted into an oligarchy? This is a question many of us should start asking. We've been told that America is a place where power rests in the hands of the people, where the voice of the individual can shape the future. But what if that's no longer true? What if, over time, the power has quietly shifted from the many to a select few? An elite group of billionaires, corporate leaders, and political dynasties who seem to hold all the cards. This isn't some far-off conspiracy theory or a future scenario. In fact, it's happening right now. Think about it. Who truly holds the power to make decisions that impact every American's life? Is it your vote, or is it the influence of money and the wealthy few? Today, we're going to dive deep into this question. Is America becoming an oligarchy? Now, I know that might sound extreme, but stick with me. By the end of this video, you'll see the evidence that's right in front of us, and you might just start asking the same question. So, don't click away. You want to stay till the end for a few eye-opening revelations. Let's get started. Before we can answer whether America is becoming an oligarchy, let's first break down what an oligarchy actually is. Simply put, an oligarchy is a system of governance where power rests in the hands of a small group of people, usually the wealthy, influential, or elite. In an oligarchy, decisions are made not by the masses, but by a select few who control the resources, the wealth, and, most importantly, the power. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't that what happens in every country? Don't the rich always have a little more influence? Sure, but here's the key difference. In an oligarchy, this concentration of power isn't just a byproduct of wealth. It is the system. The few at the top aren't just wealthier than everyone else. They hold enough power to influence laws, control industries, and even dictate how society operates. The rest of us, well, we're along for the ride. To make this clearer, think back to some historical examples. Ancient Rome, for instance, was once a republic, a place where citizens had the power to vote and influence decisions. But over time, that power became concentrated in the hands of a few rich families that controlled the wealth and the political machinery. Before long, the republic was replaced by an empire, with the elite holding all the power. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually, those at the top pushed for policies that worked in their favor. Sound familiar? In more modern times, countries like Russia have been accused of transforming from democracies into oligarchies. Wealthy individuals, known as oligarchs, control vast portions of the country's economy and have close ties with the government. The power dynamics are clear. The wealthy control the state, not the people. And the scary part is, in some ways, these shifts happen gradually, so it's often difficult to recognize them until they're fully formed. Now, you might be asking yourself, could this happen in America? The answer isn't as simple as a yes or no. It's more about where the balance of power lies right now. On paper, America is still a democracy. We vote for our representatives, we have a system of checks and balances, and we're told that the government works for the people. But does it really? Think about how things have changed in recent decades. The gap between the richest Americans and the rest of the population has widened dramatically. According to the latest data, the top 1% of Americans now control more wealth than the bottom 90 combined. That's a staggering concentration of power. And with wealth comes influence, the kind of influence that can sway elections, shape policies, and dictate the direction of the economy. So, is America becoming an oligarchy? The lines are starting to blur. The influence of money in politics has grown to such an extent that it's harder to ignore the fact that some of the wealthiest Americans seem to have more control over our laws and policies than regular citizens do. We see it in the way campaign donations flood into the political system, the way lobbyists shape policy, and how corporate interests seem to always win out over the public good. It's not a question of whether America is a democracy or an oligarchy. It's more about the degree to which democracy is being overshadowed by concentrated power. The more wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, the harder it becomes for the average American to have their voice heard. Let's talk about wealth. In America, there's a growing divide between the rich and the rest of us, and it's becoming more and more difficult to ignore. According to recent studies, the top 1% of Americans now own more wealth than the entire bottom 90 combined. That's right. A tiny fraction of the population holds more than half of the nation's wealth. How did this happen? It wasn't always like this. After World War II, America saw a period of relatively equal wealth distribution. The middle class was thriving, people had steady jobs, and most Americans believed that with hard work, they could achieve the American dream. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Over the past few decades, the rich have only gotten richer, and the rest of the country has been left behind. This isn't just a statistic. It's a pattern that shapes almost every part of our lives. Look at the skyrocketing costs of healthcare, education, and housing. For most Americans, these costs are a constant strain, while billionaires seem to thrive in a world where they can afford to pay for private healthcare and send their kids to the best schools, all without batting an eye. Meanwhile, millions of people struggle to make ends meet. So what's going on here? The wealth gap is not just a matter of people working harder or being more skilled. It's a systemic issue. The rich have access to resources and opportunities that most people can only dream of. From tax breaks for billionaires to loopholes in the system that let corporations dodge paying their fair share, the wealthy have stacked the deck in their favor. Take a look at the stock market. The wealthy control vast corporations, and when they do well, their wealth increases exponentially. But for most of America, the stock market isn't a way to build wealth. It's a spectator sport. Average citizens may have small investments, but nothing that comes close to the level of wealth enjoyed by corporate owners and their shareholders. And when the market crashes, it's the middle class and the poor who feel the brunt of it, not the rich. They have safety nets, private funds, global connections, and the ability to bounce back quickly. The rest of us don't have that luxury. So, why does this matter when it comes to the question of America becoming an oligarchy? Because wealth doesn't just buy luxury, it buys power. The wealthier you are, the more influence you have over the system. This isn't just about being able to buy a bigger house or a better car. It's about shaping policy. It's about buying politicians, funding campaigns, and swaying laws to favor the rich. When wealth becomes so concentrated in the hands of the few, it becomes easier for those people to shape the policies that govern all of us. Take a moment and think about this. When was the last time you saw a billionaire publicly challenge the system? Most of the time, they're busy making more money, expanding their empire, and making sure the system works for them. And it does. But for the rest of us, well, we just get by. This widening wealth gap is one of the clearest signs that America is shifting toward oligarchy. The rich are not just wealthier. They are rewriting the rules of the game. The more concentrated wealth becomes, the more power is transferred into the hands of a small group of people. The question we need to ask is, what does this mean for the rest of us? And how do we reclaim the democracy we were promised? Money and politics have always had a complicated relationship in America, but in recent years, the lines between the two have blurred beyond recognition. The question is no longer whether money influences politics. The real question is how much it controls the system. And the answer is staggering. Let's start with one of the most important ways money impacts politics: campaign donations. In a democratic system, elections should be about who has the best ideas, the strongest support from the people, and the ability to solve the country's problems. But what if it's not just about the people? What if it's about who can raise the most money? In America, the wealthiest individuals and corporations have turned elections into expensive battlegrounds. Take a look at super PACs, political action committees. These organizations can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to influence elections, and they're usually funded by the rich. Super PACs have been a game changer in recent years. They allow billionaires to directly shape political outcomes by supporting candidates who align with their interests. It's not just about donating to a political party anymore. It's about buying influence. A candidate with the financial backing of a few wealthy individuals or corporations is far more likely to win, even if they don't have the support of the majority of the people. One of the most high-profile examples of this is the influence of billionaires like the Koch brothers, who have poured millions of dollars into campaigns and political causes to push for policies that benefit their business interests. The Koch network, for instance, has been behind efforts to reduce taxes on the wealthy, cut regulations on corporations, and shape the nation's energy policy to favor fossil fuels. This kind of spending doesn't just sway elections. It can change the course of entire policies and laws, affecting the lives of millions of people. Lobbying is another major way that the rich wield political influence. Corporations and wealthy individuals spend billions of dollars lobbying lawmakers to pass or block legislation that affects their interests. Take the pharmaceutical industry, for example. Drug companies have lobbied for years to keep the prices of life-saving medications high, and they've been remarkably successful in doing so. Why? Because they have the money to fund political campaigns, hire top lobbyists, and make sure their interests are represented in Washington. But it's not just about buying influence. Wealthy individuals and corporations are also able to install themselves in powerful positions within government. The revolving door between business and government is another sign of how the wealthy have captured the political system. Former CEOs, lobbyists, and consultants move seamlessly from corporate boardrooms to government offices and back again. These are the people who end up making the decisions that affect all of us, and they're often more concerned with protecting corporate interests than serving the people. What does this mean for democracy? When the political process is so heavily influenced by money, it's hard to argue that we are still living in a system of government by the people. Wealthy individuals and corporations have more power to shape policies than ordinary citizens. The average person doesn't have the same resources to influence lawmakers. They can't afford to fund a super PAC or pay for a high-powered lobbyist to push for their needs. In essence, the wealthiest Americans are shaping the policies that govern us all, and their influence is only growing. This is the real danger. As the rich continue to amass more power, the voices of ordinary citizens become weaker. And when those in power make decisions based on their own interests, it's hard to call that system anything other than an oligarchy. If you're starting to feel like something is off about how power works in America, you're not alone. The rise of oligarchy in the U.S. is not just about wealth. It's about the slow, quiet erosion of the democratic ideals that this country was built on. And this erosion isn't happening overnight. It's subtle, creeping into the system like a slow leak that, over time, can drown the very principles of democracy. Let's start with voter participation. In a healthy democracy, voting is supposed to be a right and a way for citizens to have their voices heard. But in America, it's becoming harder for people to actually cast their votes. Take voter suppression, for example. In recent years, we've seen states pass laws that make it harder for certain groups, especially minorities and the poor, to vote. Voter ID laws, limitations on early voting, and closing polling stations are just a few ways that the system is designed to limit access to the ballot box. When you restrict access to voting, you restrict the people's power to choose their leaders. And when only certain people can vote, the system becomes far less democratic. Then, there's gerrymandering, the manipulation of electoral boundaries to favor one political party. In some states, districts are drawn in such a way that the party in power has an unfair advantage. This means that even if a majority of people in a region want a particular candidate, the political district lines are twisted to ensure that the outcome stays in favor of those in power. Gerrymandering distorts the true will of the people, and it's a direct attack on the principle of one person, one vote. But let's not forget the role of money here. Wealthy elites and corporations can throw their financial weight behind candidates who will support their interests. So, while the average citizen might only be able to donate a small amount of money to a campaign, the wealthy can flood the system with unlimited cash. This means that the candidates who get elected often have to cater to the interests of those who fund their campaigns, rather than to the people who vote for them. The system is rigged from the start, and it doesn't stop there. Look at the way public policy is shaped today. Time and time again, we see policies that benefit the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. For example, tax cuts for billionaires and large corporations are sold as trickle-down economics, but history has shown that these policies mostly benefit the rich. Meanwhile, working-class Americans struggle to pay for healthcare, education, and housing. These policies are not based on the needs of the majority. They're based on the interests of the powerful few. And when the needs of the people are overlooked, democracy suffers. What we're witnessing isn't just a shift in the political landscape. It's an attack on the idea of a government that is by the people for the people. When the voices of everyday citizens are drowned out by the money and influence of the elite, the very foundation of democracy begins to crack. The idea that any citizen can rise to power through hard work and dedication starts to seem like a fantasy when the rich hold all the cards. So, what does this mean for the future of America? As wealth continues to concentrate in the hands of a few, the voices of the majority will continue to fade into the background. And when ordinary Americans can no longer trust the political system to represent their interests, what's left is a government controlled by the rich, a government that looks an awful lot like an oligarchy. Now, let's look at some real-world examples to understand how oligarchy is taking shape in America. These case studies will shed light on how the concentration of wealth and power is influencing our political system and shaping the policies that affect our everyday lives. The fact is, when you examine the actions of the wealthy elite in American politics, it's hard not to see patterns that resemble oligarchic rule. First up is the influence of billionaires like Charles Koch and George Soros. These two names are often cited as examples of the power wielded by the ultra-wealthy in American politics. Both have spent vast sums of money supporting political candidates, causes, and think tanks that align with their interests. The Koch brothers, for example, have spent millions on pushing for deregulation and tax cuts for the rich, while Soros is known for his support of progressive causes and liberal candidates. Their influence has shaped policies across the board, from healthcare to education to climate change. While they may not have elected themselves into office, their wealth has allowed them to sway policy decisions that serve their interests, regardless of the public's desires. Another stark example of oligarchic influence is Amazon's Jeff Bezos. As the founder of one of the world's largest companies, Bezos has accumulated enormous wealth and influence. But it's not just about the size of Amazon. It's about how Bezos and other tech giants have used their wealth to lobby for policies that benefit them. Bezos has been involved in pushing for favorable tax policies, blocking antitrust regulations, and influencing legislation that impacts the tech industry. What's more, Amazon has benefited from billions in tax breaks and government contracts. Despite making billions in profits, the company has paid little to no federal taxes in some years, thanks to loopholes and subsidies. This kind of financial power is a textbook example of how oligarchs can manipulate the system in their favor. Let's also look at Big Pharma, an industry that has long been under the influence of the wealthy elite. Major pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Gilead spend millions lobbying Congress to block regulations that would lower drug prices. In the U.S., the cost of prescription drugs is skyrocketing, yet these companies continue to profit immensely. The influence of Big Pharma over American healthcare policy has led to the prioritization of profit over public health. Millions of Americans struggle to afford life-saving medications, while the executives of these companies take home multi-million-dollar salaries and bonuses. This is a clear example of how oligarchic interests are shaping public policy by putting profits ahead of the needs of the people. Then there's Citizens United v. FEC, a landmark Supreme Court decision that allowed unlimited spending by corporations and unions in elections. This decision opened the floodgates for money to flow into politics, making it easier for the wealthy to influence elections and political decisions. In the years since the decision, spending on political campaigns has skyrocketed. Super PACs, funded by billionaires, now have the power to sway elections and manipulate public opinion. This case shows how the judicial system has been used to solidify the power of the wealthy, allowing them to essentially buy influence and tilt the playing field in their favor. These case studies are just the tip of the iceberg. Across industries, we see wealthy individuals and corporations exerting their influence to shape the political landscape. They're not just playing by the rules, they're rewriting them. And while this may seem like just business as usual, the reality is that this concentration of power is slowly eroding the principles of democracy and replacing them with oligarchic control. So, the next time you hear about a billionaire funding a political cause, think about who benefits and who doesn't. These are the kinds of decisions that are shaping the future of America, and they're being made by a small group of people who have more power than most of us could ever imagine. As we've seen, the rise of oligarchic influence in America is undeniable. But the big question remains, is it too late for change? Can the U.S. reclaim its democracy, or has it already slipped into a system where the rich hold all the power? While the situation may seem dire, there are still signs that change is possible if the people choose to act. Let's start with the growing awareness of the problem. Over the last few years, more and more Americans are waking up to the idea that something is wrong with the system. Movements like Black Lives Matter, Fight for 15, and Occupy Wall Street have shined a spotlight on the inequalities that exist within American society. People are starting to realize that their voices are being drowned out by the money and influence of the ultra-wealthy. These movements may not have overturned the system yet, but they've started a conversation about fairness, equality, and the concentration of power. The push for campaign finance reform is another promising sign. There are growing calls to limit the amount of money that can be spent on elections, to create more transparency in the political process, and to reduce the influence of corporations and billionaires. Some states have already taken steps to introduce stricter regulations on political spending, and there is momentum building around the idea of reforming how elections are funded. The For the People Act, a major piece of proposed legislation, aims to address many of these issues by expanding voting rights, curbing gerrymandering, and limiting the influence of money in politics. While it has faced resistance, the fact that such legislation is being pushed shows that there are still efforts to fight back against the oligarchic influence in American politics. Moreover, grassroots movements and activist groups are proving that ordinary citizens still have the power to make a difference. People are organizing, marching, and using their collective voices to demand change. Whether it's pushing for universal health care, better wages, or stronger environmental protections, the people's demands are growing louder. These efforts may not lead to instant change, but they are building the foundation for a more democratic future. However, while there is hope, there are also significant challenges. The wealthy elite have an almost unlimited amount of resources to protect their interests. They have the power to fight back against reforms, to fund smear campaigns, and to use their influence to keep the status quo intact. The road to change will not be easy, and it will require more than just good intentions. It will require sustained effort, political will, and a shift in public consciousness. But history has shown us that change is possible, even in the most entrenched systems. Think about the civil rights movement in the 1960s or the push for women's suffrage earlier in the 20th century. In both cases, powerful, entrenched systems of inequality were challenged and eventually dismantled through the collective efforts of ordinary people. So, while the odds may seem stacked against us, it's important to remember that America was built on the idea of self-governance. If the people rise up and demand change, if we continue to fight for a fairer and more transparent system, then perhaps it's not too late after all. It will take time, and it will take effort, but the future of democracy depends on it. The real question now is, are we ready to take that step? Are we willing to demand a system that works for all of us, not just a few at the top? As we've explored, the rise of oligarchic influence in America is a real and growing concern. The concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few has already begun to shape our political landscape, and it's clear that the system is increasingly skewed in favor of the elite. But that doesn't mean the fight for democracy is over. The question we must all ask ourselves is, will we allow this trend to continue? Will we sit back and let the voices of the many be drowned out by the power of the few? Or will we rise up, demand change, and reclaim the democracy that was promised to us? It's easy to feel disheartened by the overwhelming influence of money and the concentration of power. But history shows us that change is possible. The people have the power to push back against the system, to challenge the status quo, and to create a fairer, more equitable society. The question is not whether it's too late, but whether we are ready to take action. Democracy is fragile, and it requires constant vigilance. It's up to us, every one of us, to ensure that the future of America remains in the hands of the people, not the powerful few. The road ahead won't be easy, but it's a road worth fighting for. So, let's ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to leave behind for the next generation? One where power is concentrated in the hands of a wealthy elite? Or one where the voices of all citizens matter equally, where democracy thrives, and where everyone has the chance to succeed? The choice is ours. If this video made you think, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think America is becoming an oligarchy? Drop a comment below and let us know where you stand. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. There's more important discussions like this to come. Stay with us on this journey as we explore the big issues affecting our world today. Together, we can make our voices heard.